This is Startup Series Latam, where we're about to take you on a journey through the dynamic world of Latin American entrepreneurship. In this show, we'll explore the stories of visionary founders and leading VCs who are transforming the region.
Never raised money before, didn't know what a startup meant, didn't know what was raising money, Series A, Series B, didn't know the lingo. But I understand rapidly enough that this has potential to scale, like seriously scale. Being an entrepreneur is super hard. You're going against all odds. Like 99.9% of startups fail. We had 300 sales, like in a matter of hours. Wow. And we didn't expect that by any means.
Welcome to Startup Series Latam, where we are inspiring líderes. Today we're back at the Levant Innovation Center in South Florida, and I'm proud to welcome Francisco Cornejo, CEO and co-founder of Storybook app, an app for children's sleep and emotional well-being with close to 4 million users worldwide, operating in 150 countries. From Cuenca, Ecuador, bienvenido, Francisco. ¿Cómo estás?
Gracias, Mariana. I'm super glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm so happy to have you here. You know, the roots of your entrepreneurial journey stem from Cuenca, and they're somewhat unusual for someone who now launched an app for children's well-being. Can you tell me about that first venture or that first moment where you took off on your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. I think it's really hard to pinpoint like where exactly my entrepreneur journey began. Since I can remember, I used to do all things to pay for my living. And I'm talking about 5 years old, 6 years old. Like I used to do trick shows with my dogs and my neighbor dogs, or I used to do homemade marmalade and sell that to the neighbors. And that's how I used to afford the things that I couldn't afford because of my family situation, coming from a single mom. And since I can remember, I always had something in between hands, like all the way through college. And I started my first formal company when I was 18 years old. Entirely different industry from what we will talk in today on the hospitality industry. But that's how I afford to pay my university studies. Shortly after, some friends told me, hey, why don't we take this concept and make it into the largest venue that we can offer in our hometown? And we went and did that for a few years. Then I switched to the corporate world. I got hired as the CMO of Honda Motors back in Ecuador. I was 22 or 23 years old, so I was by far the youngest in the C-suite back at that company. And it was a fantastic experience. Like that was a dramatic shift from being my own boss and really sailing around through entrepreneurship and learning through making a ton of mistakes to now managing a big budget in a very strict formal company. But after 5 years of that, an opportunity presented to drop everything back to where it came and start a new journey. And yeah, you know the rest of the story, but I will unfold that.
But I want our listeners and our viewers to learn the rest of the story. But first I'm going to go back. You said some fascinating things. So you're a 5-6-year-old little kid and you're doing magic tricks with your dogs to pay for, you know, your toys and the things you wanted. And then tell me about that first venture in the hospitality industry before you went on to Honda.
Yeah. So again, this is like an entirely different facet of who I am today. Most people don't know this backstory, but I'll gladly share it with you.
Please do.
So I'm starting my university studies. I'm taking this business class. I know nothing about business other than I've been doing this for a while empirically. And at that point, my interest was to party and to hang out with friends. So with a couple of friends, we decided to make that our way to pay for those parties and those expenses. So we put together a small pub in a way. It was a fascinating concept. It was something like nobody ever seen before. Like it was a small place in a really fast set of circumstances. Like people came and went in 15 minutes and we loaded them with cocktails in a small format, like shot formats. The bar name was called La Preli, which is like the preliminary to the party. And it was a fascinating concept. It grew really fast. I got sucked into that world for like 3 years. And then when I was about to sell that business, a few friends came and say, hey, why don't we expand this? So we took it to the next level. And now we were talking about a place for 1,500 people. Like we put together something really
You're
big.
like, I was doing the pre-party, now I'm
I'm doing
the
the
party.
full thing. And the pre-party and the party at the same time.
And that underscores your hunger to create things that you wish existed. You then go to the corporate world. And then what happened where you said, you know what, this isn't really working out for me. Why did you leave corporate?
Yeah. And through that journey of starting my own thing, I started to understand who I am as an entrepreneur. Because one thing is to make this for fun, and if my dog trick business doesn't work, I can go back to mom and dad. But when I started this journey of investing my own money in larger and larger companies and putting money in inventory, that the fear started to rise. But so much more my hunger and my courage to taking these challenges. So when I took Honda, that was a challenge in itself. I was super young. They were offering me a CMO position. That was like my first experience as a corporate worker. And I loved that job. I could have done it for like 10 years more. Like I really had a passion for that. It's not that I wanted to quit, but in retrospective, I was stuck. Like I was comfortable. I had a good job. I got married. I have 2 kids. Like things were pretty stable. I bought a car just recently, and one day things changed like really abruptly. It was actually a tweet. I read a tweet from the Minister of Government back in Ecuador in those days, announcing my name as a recipient of a scholarship funded by the Ecuadorian government to study abroad. And I wasn't even counting on that. Like I never expected that to happen. And it was my name there. Out of like 15,000 people, they selected 10. I was one of those 10. So I came back home, talked to my wife, and told her, hey, we have this opportunity. What do you think? We took it. Like it took us 15 minutes to say yes, and like a couple of weeks to think it through. Like, is this really a good decision? So I had to quit that job that I liked, sell everything that I have, take my wife and my 2 kids, and we moved all the way to Australia. So pretty radical decision in many ways, and start anew without knowing if I was going to find a job there. Yes, my studies were going to be paid, but what about my living expenses with a family of 4? So there was a big decision, and that was the beginning of the journey where I am at the moment.
That was the beginning of Storybook.
Exactly.
And we'll get to that. You said something fascinating that happened to me when I was in my corporate job at NBC News, and I'm sure happens to many of the people who are watching us right now, which is this idea of feeling stuck, this idea of feeling like you are not excelling and not doing what you were meant to do in this life.
Yeah.
Can you talk to people about what they should do when they're starting to feel kind of those whispers in their ear and that restlessness? What's your advice?
Yeah. This is not true for everyone, but certainly it is for me. We are not made for being comfortable for long periods of time as humans. Like we need to thrive forward. We need to feel that we are advancing. That's why we read, that's why we study, that's why we work, because we see accomplishment, and that makes us grow and feel satisfied. And there's an ultimate higher purpose and goal for everyone, but that only happens if you are pursuing something. Whenever you stand still, nothing happens. You don't grow, you don't improve. That's kind of a good definition of being mediocre, just staying in the same place. And I felt that, again, it was a great job. Like I had like everything pretty settled for me and my family, but I wasn't really growing. And it's not just advancing my career. I understood that when I moved to Australia, but my priorities were not set okay. Like I wasn't striving to the right set of goals. I was stuck on my career. I was trying to do the best that I can on my job. But the most important thing for me was always my family, and they were on a second priority. Moving to Australia allowed me to look at the new perspective on things. And that only happens when you leave the comfort zone. And that's true for everything, in your relationships, in your work, in your entrepreneurial passion, in your life as a person.
I love that. And you definitely went out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So tell me about launching Storybook, what Storybook does. I want you to tell us what inspired you and your wife, Daniela, as you're in Australia, adapting to this new system, this new society. What made you launch this venture?
Yeah, so picture this. You know that I'm moving to Australia. I'm packing my bags. I'm taking 2 toddlers, 1 and 3 years old by then, on a 50-hour flight to Australia. And leading up to those weeks, everything is excitement. Everything is what is Australia like, what is going to be your new life like. Once we hit Australia, we are marveled by the beautiful city it is. But immediately I felt like I messed this up. Like I brought my family here. We don't have a safety net. Like I have some money that we saved, but I have to figure things out for the sake of them. So that was the very beginning where I felt, was this the right decision? And after a few months, I got the confirmation that this was risky. I was putting my family in a difficult situation. I was out of home at the beginning studying. After like 4 or 5 months, I finally got a job. So studying and working, I used to leave home at 7 a.m., be back at 11 p.m. And that left Daniela and 2 toddlers alone in an apartment without knowing the language, without friends and family around, at a 16-hour time difference. They weren't even able to call somebody to get company. And as time went by, this got really stressing for Daniela and for the kids. So I used to be back late at night. The kids were jumping all over the place. Daniela was in a terrible situation, like crying, desperate. We saw early signs of anxiety in the kids, and depression, and things that you don't want to put your family through. So remember the moment that I said, was this a good decision? Now I was in this situation, and the only thing I can do is push through. Luckily, Daniela, as bright as she is, as creative as she is, she was trying to find a way to make the most of that situation. And she understood that while the kids had toys and food and parents who loved them, they were not receiving the proper emotional nutrition that they need. So there's an important part of our emotional well-being, and it's not only knowing that your parents love you, but actually feeling that your parents love you, like with your caresses and the time and the attention they give you. Everything was so rushed that we weren't really putting our focus on them. So finding ways on how to improve this connection, Daniela found out about this infant massage class.
Okay.
She started to practice infant massage. She put together the kids for the practice, like some stories and some music to make it more fun and enjoyable for them. And she was practicing these techniques, and magic happened. The kids started to fight each other about who's going to bed first because they wanted to get their massage. Yes, they wanted this peaceful, loving moment. But the true depth of what started on that moment was that they started to open up to Daniela and tell her how they feel.
So you start seeing, this very empirical, spontaneous method that Daniela put in place really work for your children.
Yeah, and it helped us to make a really decent or superb, I would say, bedtime routine, but also to really connect with them. And that's the key word, connection. Everything changed from that moment onwards, and Daniela was enjoying so much more motherhood, and I started to try to get involved into this practice, but it was really hard for me to do all these things at the same time, like massage and the story and the oils and the music. It was messy for me. And that was, again, Daniela and her creativity told me, what if we put this into an app? I think that will be super useful for people like you to make something. And
you had never launched an app before, done anything in programming before?
No. And to today, I cannot code a single line of code, but I was already reading a lot and studying about the software, and I used to work with digital marketing a lot. So this was something that I knew in theory, some of it in practice, but never made a product from the ground up. And I thought it was a fascinating idea. We searched and found that there was nothing similar to this. It was a pretty new concept, but there was a lot of literature, a lot of research on the combination of story and massage and physical stimulation and skin-to-skin touch. In fact, one of the leading researchers in the field is from Miami, and we had the privilege of meeting Professor Tiffany Field. But that took us in a journey of studying, researching, like putting together a MVP, a minimum viable product, to test this hypothesis. And
I have to ask you, because we all live in the real world, and people are probably wondering, where did you get the money to do it?
Testing an idea can be as cheap as talking to people. So in reality, what we wanted to do is, and that was probably the first MVP that we did. Daniela wrote a few stories, came up with a few massage techniques, and we showed this to a few friends. In fact, one of them in Australia told us, I love this concept. And he was my boss. I told you off the record that I used to have a really interesting job in Australia. He was my actual boss. And he told me, I love this idea. My kids loved it. If you do this, I want to be a part of that. And he was the first person who ever invested. He joined as a kind of a co-founder, helped us like create the first version of Storybook. But an MVP can be as, I don't know, $100, $50. You can test a social media ad without having the physical product, like just an ad, and see if people respond to that. So there's many ways you can, ultimately it's proving a hypothesis. Is there people who are interested in buying X? And you can go and test that. So we actually built an app super cheaply. It was like a really, now I'm embarrassed a bit of how it looked, but it combined the stories, the massage, and the music. We put it out there. Well, of course, after a few years of working on this, and on day one, after we launched, we had 300 sales, like in a matter of hours. Wow. And we didn't expect that by any means. Like we launched this hoping that somebody will pick it up. Like one download would have been enough. We got 300 sales. And I remember very vividly calling Daniela and saying, hey, remember that you posted this story about how you came up with the idea of Storybook? Yeah, it went viral. We have now over 300 sales. And she pulled over and started to cry as she was digesting this thing. This was so personal to us. And looking at how people reacted and then started to share that the Storybook was helping them not only to get their kids to sleep better, but also helping them to connect with their kids, to improve their relationship, to mend those broken, unhealthy bonds. That was, for us, like the call of the divine. Like there's something really powerful here. There's purpose, there's potential. And on that day, we decided we're going to make this our main thing, and we haven't stopped since then.
Wow. A through line that I'm seeing with you and so many of the other founders that we have interviewed for this series is this idea that even though it's not available in the market, you know that it works because you're living and breathing it firsthand, because you saw it work with your own kids and you saw the need for this out there.
Yeah.
So you launched this very kind of, preliminary version of the app. You're kind of raising money from friends and family, I imagine. How did you then say, okay, I want to validate this concept and I want to make it more robust? And how did you begin to truly, truly test it out in the bigger marketplace with tougher competitors?
Yeah. So after day one, we started to plan on scaling these and how we improve these, go beyond that first version. We took like an extra year to make a more decent version of the app, and we launched the production version of Storybook by the end of 2019. At that point, without really funding, and that remained like that for over a year. Never raised money before, didn't know what a startup meant, didn't know what was raising money, Series A, Series B, didn't know the lingo. But I understand rapidly enough that this has potential to scale, like seriously scale. Now I told we are in 150 countries, and we started to realize how people were picking up this product all over the world. So the first decision we made is let's make this a freemium model. So instead of paying to download, you can download the app for free, and then you can subscribe to access the premium features. That allowed us to grow rapidly. People on social media started to comment on this.
And that's an important point, because when it comes to apps, pricing is hard to determine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So were you doing like pay per download first, and then you said, this is not going to work out?
Yeah.
I need to switch models?
Absolutely. The thing is, and few people realize, but behind an app, there's a whole team working like 24/7 to make small tweaks, improvements all over the journey. And the only way to support that is to have incoming revenue all the time. So a pay-per-download model didn't really work. It wasn't scalable. There was a big barrier of entry. Like people, if they wanted to try the app, they had to pay first. So when you go to a freemium model, you can download for free. You can test it without any money. And then you can decide if you want to go with the free experience for life, because Storybook is free for life. You can really use it without paying a dime and getting most of the value, like the core value, you can get it. But if you want to access the extra stuff, then you can subscribe. And it's cheap. It's $60 a year. But how we get to that price, I don't think there's a perfect price. We have experimented a lot. If you think of analogies in the real world, like what's the cost of having one night of sound sleep, of feeling like your connection is being fantastically improved with your kids? What's the cost of that? And what's the cost of doing that for 2 years or 3 years? Putting the price is complicated, but we have tested this a lot. So right now we're in the perfect place, we think, in terms of pricing. People love what they get for what they pay. You can compare this to other apps, but ultimately there's a ton of value on getting your kids to fall asleep on time without hustle.
And in terms of competition, what is some of the feedback that you get? Do you get people saying like, why am I paying for this if Disney Plus costs this much a month? Do you get that sort of backlash?
Not really. In fact, we haven't, other than investors or people in the outside on the business side of things, they might ask those questions, but never heard it from a user. Like the kind of things we hear users is very divided. Like, why should I pay for an app if everything on the internet is free? That's like one side of the aisle. And there are people who say, if this is bringing value, I'm willing to pay for this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you said, the price of having that one night of the kids going to bed on time and you feeling that you really connected with them, that's invaluable.
Yeah.
Eso es invaluable. Eso no tiene precio.
Sí.
Talk to me about funding, because you just said something that was very relatable to many folks who are watching, which is you didn't know what seed round was or Series A or how to raise money. You raised $4 million in a pre-seed round. So securing funding can be one of the toughest challenges for any entrepreneur, especially in Latin America.
Yeah.
So what takeaways have you learned from that journey?
A lot. And by making all the mistakes. The first time I ever spoke with an investor, I went to a startup fair, and I sit down with this person, and I told him, hey, we're looking to raise this kind of money. And he told me, why? That's too little. You should be asking for twice or thrice as much. And then to the next person, we're looking for twice as much as what we told the other guy. And this guy was like, but there's a pre-money, post-money cap. We didn't know what we're talking about. So by talking to investors and embarrassing ourselves on the very first conversations, we started to learn. And of course, there's a lot of resources out there. But ultimately, we understood that the more you tell your story, the more you speak with investors, the more you can learn what are they thinking about the industry, the business, what are the opportunities, the potential challenges. So it's a great way of educating yourself from people who have a really interesting perspective of the industry. And it certainly wasn't easy. It took us a full year to raise our first ever check. We already had traction, we already had sales. We hit profitability a few months over that first year. And things changed really rapidly when Jason Calacanis, JCal, invested in us. He's one of the best-known investors, angel investors in the US. And he found about Storybook. He was super convinced. In 24 hours, I got his, hey, we want to invest in your company. So that changed everything. Like in a matter of a few weeks, we managed to raise more investment than we expected.
Getting a guy like that, it's sort of like he puts the stamp of approval on it, and then everybody else follows.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get that one person.
It is, and at that point, there's a lot of drama in between. At that point, we already had a few investors lined up, like they were thinking on investing at different terms, and we were like kind of deciding where we are going until Jason showed up, and we thought that was the best decision. The valuation that he gave us was worse than the others that we had in conversations, but that's one takeaway of raising funds. It's not only about the money. The money, yes, helps, of course, but it's also about the value. And sometimes that's the stamp of approval, or sometimes that's the expertise they bring or the connections that they may open for you. So one of the things that I certainly know is that not every investor is the same, and it's really important to find true added value investors.
That's great advice. Tell me about the marketplace that you are operating in. Evidently, you're in 150 countries, but I understand that there's a big chunk of your users who are Latinos here in the United States. Yeah. That's I believe it's $3 trillion economy, Latinos here in the US. And then you are very big in the Latin American market as well. So talk to me about this Miami, you're operating here, Latinos, and Latam pan-regional market or opportunity that exists now. Yeah.
Because of who we are and where we come from, we naturally found fit in Latinos. We Latinos are more physical even. Like when you talk to somebody, you grab their shoulder and that changes like the conversation. You feel closer to people. So there's that interaction. There's more. It comes more natural. So a product like Storybook naturally flew through Latinos at the beginning. We decided to move to the US and specifically to Miami because of that reason. Like we saw how the app was growing in the US, but we also saw how it was spreading through Latin America. And Miami seemed like a perfect place to keep looking for both markets. Right now we have around 50% of our users are in the US. Mexico is our second most popular country. And we get these stories from all over the world, really. We have paying subscribers in over 100 countries. We have just a handful of languages, but despite that, there's a global need. That's something that we have learned. There's a global need for something like Storybook. There's a ever-growing concern on children's mental health.
Absolutely.
And that there's a really profound crisis. This generation of children has been called the anxious generation.
We were literally just talking about that off camera.
It's a fact. We know that. And exactly Storybook, we see Storybook as the antidote to that. And I'll name a few quick reasons, but there's no screen time with Storybook. It's just audio, which is brilliant because you don't want kids stuck on a screen before bedtime. Storybook fosters that interaction between the parent and the child. Again, for us Latinos, it might come more naturally. It's certainly not everyone's case. It was hard for me, like being physically effective with my kids. Right. That was tough. I wasn't raised like that. But a Storybook facilitates that because it's giving you like these sets of relaxation exercises. And again, not only with Latinos, with everyone. Like, it helps you to be more physically effective with your kids and creates this ritual of weekly, daily, nightly moments of interaction. And that's true in Latin America, that's true in the US. We need to have more of that time with our kids.
Tell me, what languages is it available in? I imagine Spanish, English?
Spanish, English, Portuguese, Japanese. We're about to launch Arabic, and we're adding 2 new languages more.
So as you talk about languages and being in over 100 countries, you also have a team that is very remote. How do you keep that company culture cohesive and strong while everybody is working hybrid all over the place?
I love this question, and I can go for hours about company culture. But one of the first decisions that we made when we started Storybook and hired our first couple of people was we are selling connection. We are selling this meaningful relationship between parent and child. And the number one enemy to that, it's often your career. That was certainly my case. So how can we create a company where family is the number one thing and not working at the company?
Right.
So we started hiring people all over the world. We have people in 7 different countries, I believe. And the first thing I told each of them is, I want you to work for us, give the best that you got, but the main priority you have to keep is your family. Like your wife, your kids, your husband, your kids, your brother, your sister, whomever you live with, that's your number one priority. And the rest of that, give it to us the best that you can. So we have great policies like we don't want anyone to miss a birthday, a family thing. Every one of them can work as many times, as many hours or as little hours as they need, so they attend that. And every time somebody asks for permission, my response is family first. That's our motto. So nobody misses anything. We work remotely because that helps to be present with your kids,
of course,
especially when you don't have help or anything like that. So that's one of the things we do. And our culture is really about that, about putting family first. It will be hypocrita of us doing something different and preventing people who really enjoy their family. And there's this wording about work-life balance, which is odd because balance means something goes up, something goes down.
Absolutely.
We try to keep it more integration in a way, so you can enjoy your family life and have a meaningful career, but you have to really understand how to integrate that. And I think we are making the most that we can to give access to that to our team. The team loves working with us. So I think we're doing a good job there.
Final question before I go into our lightning round, Francisco. You have moved halfway across the world. You started a bar, then you worked in corporate. Now you're launching this app. You're doing that with your family. Lots of risk. And I love that you said, there was a moment I got really scared.
Yeah.
And there was a moment where I said, shoot, did I make the right decision? Because that also happened to me. And the people who are watching us right now, people who dream of starting their own companies, you will have those moments of fear and uncertainty. Tell me about one mistake that you made, one moment that you learned from that you wish wouldn't have happened in your journey.
I can certainly name so many, and I already told you a few during this interview, but I want to touch something rapidly before. You said this. I've seen this trend. Founders typically experience that problem in the past, and there's something really deep in that, I believe. Being an entrepreneur is super hard. You're going against all odds. Like 99.9% of startups fail. Like it's really tough. It's challenging on your health, on your mental health. You have to sacrifice time. I spoke with you about how we try to prioritize time with the families. But there are so many challenges. And the reason why we keep putting a fight and waking up every day to do the best that we can is because we believe in this mission, because we experience that and we know it's worth it to keep doing this. So as we talk about failures, we made so many. Like, again, feeling like a complete failure abroad with my 2 kids and my wife, like with her life shattered. I felt like a failure. Like I was failing at being a dad, a husband, a person, and that was really tough. But again, Storybook wouldn't exist if there wasn't for that moment and the decisions that happened after that. I think that's a characteristic that we have as Latinos. Like, we've been through pain. From our economies through our realities, like we've been through pain, and that when you learn the lessons and when you push through, you grow. Going out of your comfort zone, like that's important in our lives. So talking about mistakes, moving to Australia felt like a mistake, but it wasn't one. Moving to the US has definitely felt scary from time to time, still to the day, but we know we have a deeper purpose. We have a stronger reason.
And all of these failures were really stepping stones to your success. And truly, you can't have one without the other.
Absolutely.
And your story is a reflection of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm going to finish with a quick Latino lightning round, which is how we finish every show. I'm going to ask you something. You have to answer literally with the first thing that comes to mind, okay?
Spanish or English?
¿Estás listo? No, in English, of course. Se vale Spanglish también. Okay. What is one word that best describes your entrepreneurial journey?
Perseverance.
Perseverance. Beautiful word. Which trend, country, or sector in Latam are you most excited about right now?
Education.
Who in the business world inspires you the most, dead or alive?
I will name Latino, an Ecuadorian entrepreneur actually. Sebastian Castro, I think it's doing a fantastic job with his company, Kushki, the first Ecuadorian unicorn.
Maybe we'd love to have him on the show.
Okay.
So consider this an open invite.
Absolutely.
If you could solve one problem in Latin America with a snap of your fingers, what would that be?
Education.
Okay, are you ready for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, one Latin American song that you blast after you've had a really tough day at work.
Okay. I'm thinking about Soda Stereo.
Of course, thank you for saying. Which one?
Confort y Música para Volar,
Okay.
which is the MTV Unplugged
Wow.
album. I really like that one. But yeah, you caught me off guard.
No, but that's a good one. I'm going to say Persiana Americana. That will be mine.
Yeah.
Final question. Favorite Latin American saying in Spanish, eso dicho en español, that is applicable to
I
business?
have so many.
One that is applicable to business.
This is really random, but just today, that's why I'm so biased with this one. I was telling my kids how my grandmother used to tell me, and this was about like eating in a fancy place. A donde fuereis, hacéis lo que viereis. So when you don't know what spoon or silverware you have to use, then check the neighbor, what they are doing, and try to do the same.
In your business life, you've done the opposite of what exists because you've totally innovated with something new that is changing the lives of many people, and we thank you for that. Ultimately, it's about connection, and that's what we're about in this show. Así que gracias. Gracias, Francisco.
Mariana. Thank you.